What's up, founders, and welcome back to another hot take. My name is Asia Orangio, and I'm the CEO and founder of DemandMaven, where we work with SaaS companies on troubleshooting their growth and defining their go-to-market strategy. So why do you need a go-to-market strategy? What is the pressure, or what is the requirement when it comes to defining go-to-market? As a quick refresher, go-to-market strategy is specifically the strategy, the plan, the approach that you are going to take in order for you to win in a particular market. Go-to-market strategy includes everything from the product itself, to the model that you are going to leverage, to the market that you're going to ultimately enter, to the channels, and so on and so forth. It's literally every single aspect of the business that it's going to take for you to win. But here's what I find is really common with SaaS companies, especially when they achieve a certain level of product market fit and maybe they start entering into a traction phase or a traction era of the business. Really common among CEOs and founders is to never actually define the go-to-market strategy in the first place. In fact, I find it's a lot of just flying by the seat of your pants, and there's just a lot of moving parts. The interesting thing too is that, and many, again, CEOs and founders might not realize this, but they're actually making go-to-market decisions all the time. And when a go-to-market strategy is not really defined, it actually makes it really difficult to do all of the things that we ultimately want to do in the first place, which is grow and achieve a certain level of MRR or revenue or whatever that growth goal is, or goal in general is. Makes it really difficult to actually achieve that when we don't have a go-to-market strategy in place. So because you're actually making go-to-market decisions all the time, what ends up happening is you end up in this place where, because you don't necessarily have a go-to-market strategy, a couple of things kind of fall into place after that. And it usually has the opposite effect of what you want to have happen. You end up making really random, willy-nilly decisions about the business, the product, the channels that you leverage, the models that you leverage. You end up making a bunch of just random decisions based off of a few hunches, but because of that, it's not really defined, and it just gets really weird and hairy after that. If you have a team, it's also worth noting that the team is also constantly making decisions about go-to-market strategy, whether you realize it or not, and whether it's aligned or not, which is also really fun. I'll give you a great example. Let's say you have a sales team, a marketing team, a product team, a customer success team, and of course, an engineering team or development team, whichever word you prefer. And let's also say that the sales team, for whatever reason, their leads have dried up. Maybe they've completely tapped out from a market perspective. And then they decide that one time they had this really awesome phone call with this one kind of customer from this one particular customer segment. And now they're gonna go off and go after that customer segment. Meanwhile, marketing is continuing to focus on the original core go-to-market segment that it is that they started focusing on in the first place. Product is also continuing to build for that particular customer segment, and maybe even also building for another part of the customer base that isn't even necessarily the best paying customer. And then of course, engineers are building all of this. And then all of these teams are making go-to-market decisions constantly. And whether it actually aligns with the business and whether or not it aligns with the overall business strategy is honestly, at that point, it's unknown. It's really tough to know if that's even the right direction that all of these teams should be aligned and focused on. This is where I typically recommend, if you're in that place where you've got a business, you've got a product, you have paying customers, but you don't have a go-to-market strategy, it is absolutely critical that you sit down and define it, even if it's not 100% accurate, and even if it also could potentially be wrong. Even if it's wrong, yes, sit down and define it anyway, because even just getting it on paper and into one place actually helps you create a foundation and a baseline, a benchmark for what you need to do next and for what you need to adjust, to change, and then of course to actually execute on for you to reach your ultimate goal, which is, to win. Here's what happens when you don't sit down and you define a go-to-market strategy. I see this all the time. There's usually there's 2 to 3 things, if you will, that happen. The first is that you end up making willy-nilly decisions, whether it's just you, the sole founder, it's just you in the business, or you have teams, you're a CEO, you lead many different departments or groups, or maybe you're somewhere in between there. Without a defined go-to-market strategy, you end up making decisions based off of what feels like really good hunches, but you might make decisions in one area of the business that directly conflict with another area of the business. So for example, we really want to go after this particular customer segment. Let's say we want to go after enterprise companies, but we've deployed per seat pricing that the enterprise companies that we want to go after will probably never be interested in because, whatever, like maybe like there's a particular kind of company that you're going after and per seat pricing for whatever reason is unattractive. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe they're super open to per seat pricing, but maybe a few months ago we kind of decided to change the model to something totally different and now it's less attractive to this new customer segment that we're going after. Those are two conflicting parts of a go-to-market strategy, but unless we have it all in one place, it's really easy to just make a decision about something, whether or not it's grounded in any kind of cohesion with everything else that's going on. It also gets really easy to make decisions on the fly, and like I say willy-nilly, but it's just purely based off of our own emotional state that we're in, or potentially even based off of things that we are afraid of, concerned about, especially when you are a solo founder and it is just you in the business. It's super easy to just go off into a direction that might not actually help you achieve your goal for the business anyway. It's really, really, really easy to do this. Super common, incredibly common, and also at the same exact time, it can be really harmful, but it is totally reversible, and we can absolutely avoid this just by sitting down and defining it in the first place. The second thing is that, especially in a team setting, when you have a defined go-to-market strategy, it actually helps you as CEO, as founder, keep the rest of the team aligned according to what it is that the business is going to accomplish in the first place. This is especially true for early stage SaaS companies, maybe when the team is a lot smaller and you don't necessarily have endless resources. A true go-to-market strategy will actually help you keep everyone aligned, so that way everyone knows here is how we believe we're going to ultimately win in the market. And if we decide to maybe change our minds about something, it's easier to engage in that kind of change management and just operational shift, both mindset wise, tactically, execution, strategically, I mean, you name it. Having an actual defined go-to-market strategy, again, it keeps everyone aligned. But when you want to change it, it's much easier to go through that process when you have something to stand on in the first place. Otherwise, you end up talking about go-to-market strategy that was never defined, and then therefore no one really knows anyway, like where we're coming from in the first place. And it just gets harder to communicate that new strategic alignment or that new strategic vision. You'll also find that having a defined go-to-market strategy, especially in the early days, also means that you use your resources in the absolute best way possible. So for example, if you've got the sales team over here, customer success is really focused on this kind of customer, and then marketing is doing this, and product is building for this entirely different segment, you'll find that trying to win when you have a really small team can actually be really challenging if they're spread across all these different strategies at the end of the day. But when they're all focused and aligned in one direction, then you can move forward together. And that's usually where like the big, massive increases in growth happen. That's when growth feels much smoother. I hate to say easier because it's always challenging, but it is much more predictable usually in those circumstances when the entire business moves forward as a unit, as opposed to departments moving in completely different directions that have nothing to do with each other. Or they might be kind of related to each other, but not correlated enough to result in that ultimate growth. So my friends, this is why I say get your go-to-market strategy defined. Use whatever processes, frameworks, resources that you ultimately need. That's still worthwhile. That's still worth the effort. And then of course, working with other teams, if you have other leaders, of course, in your business, working with them to also add in their perspective to that go-to-market strategy, and then also just really taking your time to really understand how do you ultimately want to win as a business in the market that you're in. This can take you so far. Again, even if it's not perfect. Even just having that baseline, it makes all the difference, and it helps you avoid everything earlier that I mentioned. Well, within reason. I mean, I guess you could have just a terrible strategy. But usually I find even just, sitting down and writing this out, creating this, defining it, mapping it, whatever process makes sense for you. Usually that's enough to get you thinking in the right areas, and then also identifying really key core aspects of the business to improve, which is also why I love go-to-market strategy. It's a lot of fun. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I really hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I will absolutely get back to you. And as per usual, if you don't want to miss another hot take, make sure that you smash that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.